think it's just right about 6 p.m. now, your time, so we can kick off this discussion. I first want to say thank you both so much for joining and sharing your opinions, sharing your perspectives, sharing with us today. And one day before the 1-year anniversary of the devastating tragedy was the Beirut port explosion. I am really looking forward to hearing your perspectives on what the past year looked like, and we would love to hear as much as you all are feeling comfortable and open sharing today. So just thank you both again for being here. For everyone joining, this is the Lebanon team from the organization MedGlobal, and MedGlobal is a humanitarian and global health organization that currently has operations in 7 countries around the world. We work in Bangladesh, Colombia, Palestinian territories, Lebanon, Sudan, Syria, Yemen, and we're also supporting the COVID response right now in India. We were founded in 2017 and have grown so quickly. Our Lebanon team is also about 1 year old of an operational presence, and what you all have accomplished in the past year is beautiful and mind-blowing. It's something that I think we're all really proud of. So thank you both for joining. My name is Pat. I'm the Director of Communications and Policy at MedGlobal, and I'll be facilitating more or less a Q&A with Dr. Tanya and Radia. And Tanya and Radia, wonderful if you could introduce yourself.
Thank you very much for doing this, Kat. I mean, as sad as it is to remember this day, we've been really honored to be a part of MedGlobal. So I'm Dr. Tanya Baban. I'm an ophthalmologist, and I've been working with MedGlobal for the past year almost. I started working almost after the blast, and really, as Kat said, the impact that we've had has been really heartwarming so far, and we're doing our best really to try to reach as many people as possible and assist in every possible way in relation to healthcare with what the country is going through. So we'll be happy to answer the questions today and to see how we can improve ourselves and to provide better assistance to the country.
Hi,
Radia.
so I'm Radia Saleh. I'm the Procurement and Logistics Coordinator for MedGlobal. I started right after the Beirut last year as part of the emergency response team, and it was the first emergency response team that MedGlobal had deployed. So it was a first for everyone, for MedGlobal as an organization, and for me as a newbie to the NGO world. I'm beyond grateful to have been part of this. It has been heartwarming and a great experience for me to be able to help on the ground, to be able to be part of such a great initiative. I'm sure that there's a lot to be done, but we have touched the lives of so many people. Tanya and I feel this every single time we're on the field, whether it's we're going to hospitals, whether we're going to the camps we've been to, whether it's PHCs. I mean, it's just even working with the partners. We have established a lot of great partners in Lebanon, and we're learning along the way. And thank you to all the partners, the donors, and to MedGlobal for making it possible for us.
Thank you both, and I would echo the partners that we have in Lebanon that you all work with and that you all have spearheaded the relationships with are incredible. It's been amazing to hear about the work that they're doing and that we're able to coordinate with and support. Thank you both for those introductions. And for anyone who's watching in, I'm loving the shout outs. I agree. We love you, Dr. And please feel free to ask any questions as well that Tanya and Radia can answer. I'll start with questions, and then we'll obviously take the questions from those who are watching as they So I guess just to begin, I guess just to begin, as you all know well, tomorrow will be the 1 year anniversary, 1 year since the devastating tragedy that was the Beirut blast. Can you describe the impact that the Beirut blast has had on Lebanon and on the people of Beirut in particular?
Kat, just a reminder that the explosion happened at a time when the Lebanese people had already been emotionally and physically drained. We're talking about a time when the country was already going through an economic meltdown, with the dollar losing its, the Lebanese pound losing its value, the inflation rates increasing. We had an influx of refugees due to a 10-year Syrian civil war, as well as the spike in COVID cases with the COVID pandemic. So, the country in September 2019 had 33% of its population either living at or below the poverty line. And more recently, post-explosion and with everything that's been going on, these numbers have been estimated by the UNHCR to reach 77%. So we have 77% of the Lebanese population living under the poverty line right now. And keeping in mind that the Lebanese population is quite small compared to other countries that surround it. So we're talking really big numbers here. We have an unemployment rate that has reached above 50% right now. So when we're talking about the humanitarian impact of the blast, which was and remains very daunting, we're talking about 218 losses of life. We're talking more than 7,000 injuries. We're talking 300,000 people who have lost their homes. And this coming as an additional stress to the country's ongoing medical and healthcare stress on resources was really just a hit to the population's mental breakdown. So yes, it was quite devastating. It was quite, I don't even know how to describe it emotionally. I want to say shocking. I want to say, but really there are no words. I've been in Lebanon long enough to have lived several turmoil that the country has gone through. But not once did I see the helplessness and hopelessness in people's eyes the way you see them today. It's almost like something broke in every single person in the country. So yes, we've had our souls broken, we've had our hearts broken, and it's really hard to see how we can come out of this physically and emotionally. So I don't know if Radia wants to add anything, but it is.
The Lebanese people are already living a lack of confidence in their government and public institutions. Before the August blast, we had the revolution taking place and the riots, and so people were already fueled up. And then after calming down a bit and the pandemic happening, the blast took place, and then things got worse from there. And then it was like one crisis after the other. And instead of like the government rising and starting with the aid, starting with some reforms, it was all like going backward. And just like Dr. Tanya said, employment rates started going up, fluctuations in the exchange rate, and then no reforms have been shown. After the blast took place, the Minister of Interior went up and said that we're gonna start investigations the next day, and in 3 days we'll be able to give the people some information. A week later, the government resigns, and then a year later, nothing has happened. So this also added to the lack of confidence in the government, in its reforms, and this didn't help on any kind of level, neither economically, neither socially, and this is adding to people's anxiety and stress, and mental health has become a huge topic of debate in Lebanon. Like, it usually was a taboo, and now people are really talking about it, raising awareness, encouraging. We're seeing a lot of NGOs come up and speak openly about it. So hopefully this is like a start, but it's a bit vague.
Yeah, thank you both so much. And I think that that is such important background context. It wasn't just one day, it wasn't in a vacuum. The context of everything that came before, everything that the people of Lebanon were experiencing is so critical as well. On your point, Radia, um, as as you know also well, the health sector was just acutely damaged well by the Beirut blast, and hospitals were damaged, health centers were destroyed. Could you talk a little bit more about the scale of damage to the health sector and how people were able to access healthcare directly after the blast, as well as access issues that may have continued over the past year?
It happens to be
Go ahead.
It happens to be that the port is located in the hub of Beirut, where a lot of the main hospitals that accommodated for patients were there. So 3 of the main hospitals in Beirut were severely affected by the blast. They had to be completely closed and shut down. It was like a rush hour for them at that time, where visitors were leaving the hospital, patients were still there. You had the doctors still with ongoing consultations. So the moment the blast happened, the hospitals could no more accommodate for incoming patients, and they had to transfer their critical case patients to other hospitals. The other hospitals in Beirut were flooded with patients. Some patients had to be treated in ambulances on the street. Doctors were coming in from all over Lebanon into the city to try and help with the first aid and primary care, to accommodate for after the blast care. And so at that point, because of the chaos that has been going around, there was no sort of no masks, no gloves, no hygiene, nothing. So a week after the blast, the cases were going up from 200, 300 cases, reaching to 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 cases. The hospitals were really, really overwhelmed. You could see the pictures were devastating, heart breaking, doctors sleeping on the floor, families not knowing where their loved ones were. I mean, it was all extremely chaotic. The first week was crazy, not needless to mention the first days, the first couple of hours.
Thank you, Radia. Just to give a bit of a background about the Lebanese healthcare before that, I mean, the private healthcare sector in Lebanon is already prohibitively expensive. And as such, the Lebanese population and probably the migrants and the refugees rely on the public sector. So the main hospitals in Beirut that were governed by the Ministry of Health that were catering to the COVID cases, we've had the spike to be the largest percentage in the Beirut area. So we've had, I mean, remembering that this happened before the vaccination rollout. So we hadn't started the vaccination rollout at the time. And one of the main hospitals, Rafiq al-Hariri Hospital, was the main hospital to receive COVID patients. And with the explosion and on top of the economic crisis, we've had a lot of patients becoming more reliant on public health services. So that's in addition to the economic crisis and the COVID patients who were already flooding hospitals that were already stretched, let's say, with resources because of the lack of money and the lack of import. And then the blast happened. The port of Beirut caters to almost 80% of the import for the country when it comes to medical equipment, chronic medications, even nutrition and food. The second port that we have is located in Tripoli, which is a 90-minute drive from the capital. So as Radia said, the capital was, the impact of the explosion really was devastating. We have 3 hospitals that were completely destroyed. One of the hospitals located 1 kilometer away from the port had to evacuate all its patients with no electricity on the stairs. This is a hospital that I did my specialty in, and I had several friends injured, and I've known people who've lost their lives. And my friends literally told me they had to carry patients on their shoulders with the phones in their mouth for lighting, to set up a field hospital in a parking lot to be able to function and treat these people. I've heard people had to travel because of the huge number of patients going to the emergency rooms, and the lack of human resources to be able to cater to all these patients' needs. Some patients had to drive for hours outside the city to find a hospital that would take them to assist in their injuries. We've had third-degree burns, blast injuries, and the people who were not physically injured, you have the long-lasting emotional, the mental health part of this that is really hard to, I don't want to say get over, but maybe to deal with or to understand. As for the immediate impact of the blast, I don't think anyone processed it. There were people looking for their loved ones. We already had no electricity. We already had a lockdown. We already had 300 cases of corona per day, no vaccinations. So it was just chaos, and it really made things worse by exacerbating the pandemic in the country. So this was our reality for the longest time, and it still is.
Yeah, I mean, thank you both for giving, I mean, that context and those just really jarring and I imagine incredibly painful anecdotes. And thinking about COVID, as you were just saying, Anya, this all happened during COVID and has, of course, had a huge impact on the ability to respond to the COVID crisis. Could you talk a little bit more about any impact that the aftermath of the blast or just even the past years had on the COVID response?
Could you repeat that, please? I'm sorry, my connection's cutting.
Sure, no problem. Any more information on what the impact of the blast was on the COVID response from the health sector would be great.
So if I understood you correctly, you want to know of our COVID response as MedGlobal on the ground.
Sure, the COVID response from MedGlobal and in general, and if the blast had any impact on that.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, other than the fact that there was a huge number of patients that the hospital couldn't cater for, and in addition to the obviously lack of available beds, at one point we had a complete occupancy of ICU beds with no vacant ventilators to cater for patients with respiratory failure due to the virus. So what we were looking into is how to help discharge stable patients who are in need of an oxygen source. So again, there are patients who need oxygen once they're infected with the virus, but they're clinically stable. And you can send these patients home on an oxygen source, whether it's an oxygen tank or an oxygen concentrator. Unfortunately, these have become very expensive in the country. We're talking about $1,000 to be paid in cash in dollars for an oxygen concentrator. Obviously, patients cannot afford this. They get paid in Lebanese lira. The minimum wage right now is $37 a month, is equivalent to that. We're talking about an inflation of above 200, losing 95% of the value. So what MedGlobal did initially, before I started with MedGlobal, Radia was taking care and took control of this project. They started with hygiene kits. And I think that was very important at the time because not only people were not maybe taking it seriously, but wearing a mask was not a habit. We had gone through 2 waves, and during the explosion, we were actually in our second lockdown, which, to be honest, I am grateful for. This lockdown was during the summer, so there were no tourists, there were not a lot of people out and about. This is rush hour. It was 6:05 in the evening. So the help we tried as much as we could at the time to supply the much needed gloves at the time. They were becoming very expensive, PPE material, medication that was required specifically for COVID cases were completely absent. And at one point when we donated that lot of medication to a government hospital, they were very surprised and grateful that Radia was able to procure and purchase these medications. And really, we were so humbled by the fact that this was actually life-saving. More recently, we're very proud to have been able to donate 66 oxygen concentrators to more than 16 healthcare centers in Beirut, all the way to the north, including hospitals and clinic, where patients were able to take these concentrators home, and this in return would decrease the crowd or the load on the hospital staff and hospital beds. The whole point is to have a space to cater for an emergency patient. And if you don't have that, patients, whether it's medication or a space or the staff to take care of the patient, never in my life did I think that in Lebanon, patients would die because of lack of medications or because they couldn't reach the hospital or because we don't have oxygen, but it's happening. And being someone who comes from that field is very difficult to process. I mean, Lebanon is known to have one of the best educational systems in the Middle East. And we did have one of the best medical or the healthcare sector in the Middle East, and people would come from all over the region to get treatment. Now, not only have most of the skilled doctors fled the country, we don't have basic medication, including paracetamol. They sell it by the pill in the pharmacies. Lack of antibiotics. There are 2 cases of children who've died because their parents couldn't find the required antibiotic for a simple respiratory infection. In the 21st century in Lebanon, this is, I mean, it's beyond words. I don't even want to say unacceptable, but it just baffles me that we've come to this. And we're, as MedGlobal, we're trying to do the best we can. And like Radia said, it's very humbling to see the response. But at the same time, you can see the despair in people's faces when they say, please don't forget us, because they need us. They need assistance, they need help, they need support, whether it's just a kind gesture or help with medications, nutrition, food supplies, anything right now. I mean, I remember I read just a quote by a healthcare official, and right after, the day after the explosion, and he said, we need everything to hospitalize the victims, and there's an acute shortage of everything. So this is where we are. And this was a year ago, and we're actually much worse now than what we were a year ago.
One of the things that we did right after the blast was that we surveyed the area that the blast took place, and we saw what the dire needs at that time, and we set up a tent adjacent to the port that provided primary healthcare services. We had medical consultations. We even provided mental health consultations. We had a psychiatrist with us on board. In that tent, we provided medication. We weren't going through the crisis in medications that we were going through at the moment, so we were able to cater to more than 3,000 patients at that time. We had, it was a huge success, and we were hoping to be able to continue with such initiatives. And that's when Dr. Marwa and Dr. Tanya developed an elderly program plan that catered to the elderly for home visits. They provided follow-up visits, they provided the medications, it covered all the costs. That was a huge success for us. And in addition to the PPE material distribution, we distributed, that was in the beginning, in the first month of working with MedGlobal, we distributed 300 hygiene kits to families within the Beirut blast area. And then we did home visits at that time. We talked to a lot of people, took down their needs. And from there on, we started writing proposals for projects that we saw that would help the country a bit stand back on its feet. We collaborated with a local NGO, Embrace, to help raise mental health awareness. We covered the costs of around 200 consultations for over a 4-month period with psychiatric and non-psychiatric medications. And Embrace has been one of the first NGOs in Lebanon to tackle such the mental health awareness, and they had the first suicide hotline available in Lebanon. So they're also doing a lot of great work. So we've had a lot of programs that help in the health sector, in developing the health sector in Lebanon. We're hoping that in the future we'll be able to do a lot more, but we need the help of our donors and our supporters to be able to continue this great work.
Yes, thank you both so much for that. I think that's an amazing overview of the work that MedGlobal Lebanon has been doing, that you all have been spearheading with our partners, and particularly thinking of Embrace, who you just mentioned, and what you've both discussed already is just the really extreme and long-lasting mental health impact, of course, that the blast has had, will have. It would be wonderful to hear any other resources that you all know of for mental health support that are available, particularly with the blast being the 1-year anniversary this week.
We're currently working on several proposals, developing several ideas to be hopefully implemented in the near future. Most of them, like one of them is targeting mental health awareness with kids, because a lot of kids have developed PTSD post the blast, and the pandemic didn't have the fact that schools in Lebanon did not open. Kids were staying at home, parents were already stressed out from the economic situation, from the blast, from the pandemic. So things were really piling up and adding up. We're trying to figure out a way to implement these projects to reach a vast number of people. And the thing I'm extremely proud of, I'm sure as well as Dr. Tanya, is that we're able to reach people literally from the north to the south of Lebanon. We have been able to help within the blast area, and then we have targeted camps in Arsail, which is in the north of Lebanon. We have went to Tripoli, to hospitals and PhDs over there. And then now we're developing the car, and now we're helping, we're trying to develop programs to be able to implement such projects in the south. So I think this is one of our pluses, that we're really diversifying. We're trying to target as many areas as we can, as much people as we can.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, in addition to the recent history, the explosion did create a mental health challenge, if not for hundreds of thousands of Beirutis, but probably even for the Lebanese people living abroad, seeing this happen on TV, and it was recorded so many times from so many different angles and shared on social media, and it was quite disturbing to see those images. And there are an estimate of hundreds of thousands of children who now face mental health challenges. These children, like Radia said, and she experiences firsthand with her own kids. I mean, these children are not allowed to mingle with other children. They can't go to school because of COVID. And then you have children who've witnessed firsthand the destruction of their homes, of a death of a loved one, death of a friend, and they hear their parents constantly talking about the situation. And we've had an increased rate of PTSD and untreated PTSD due to whatever financial or lack of medications, for the lack of resources on the long run leads to chronic problems of depression and anxiety, and just the inability or to have like negative coping mechanisms with what's going on. So really the people in the country, and I speak for myself, it hasn't been easy. For the first few days after the blast, I would literally, if I had to go out of the house and I'm in my car, I would break down and cry because I would think, what if there's another explosion that's going to happen while I'm driving by? Um, and we're all in the vicinity. It could be anywhere. What prevents it from happening again? I mean, this has been there since 2013 and nothing has been done. So it could be anywhere else. So the people really need substantial emotional and psychological support to help them. I don't want to say come to terms, but to help them cope with what's going on, the suffering that continues to happen on a daily basis, with things getting worse. Every morning we wake up to, sorry, it's the sun. Every day we wake up to something happening, and just when you didn't think it can get worse, it just does. And not to be so morbid, but we did, as Radia said, have a very nice program that was initiated with Embrace. Embrace was started as a suicidal hotline that had a schedule, but they have now expanded to be a 24/7 service, and they have an emergency mobile unit that will respond to any any suicide or urgent cases, to go there and respond on the ground. So when we collaborated with Embrace, they started having clinic appointments to see patients for free. And again, Radia's efforts were remarkable in this, because at the time, the psychotropic medications were extremely difficult to find, and they were able to locate those and secure them. And we were very fortunate to collaborate with a pharmacy. So we had, because these medications, again, are controlled by the government, they need a special prescription. So Embrace would see the patients. MedGlobal would cover the expenses of all the consultations as well as the medications. The patients would get their prescription and would go to the pharmacy to get their medication for free. Irrespective of their background, irrespective of whether or not they've been vetted for whether or not they need the free treatment. But we just wanted to reach as many people as possible. But now, like Radia said, mental health is one of the projects that has become a main issue for us. And right now we're targeting children. So the new project that was hopefully will be initiated by the second quarter of this year would be to teach children how to cope with the COVID lockdowns, with understanding what it entails, and how to, I don't want to say survive, but how to mentally address these issues of anxiety, talking them over, being able to approach their parents and discussing these feelings that they're having, or this fear that they're having. It's not easy, but we have to start somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sounds like one of the most important projects that our MedGlobal Lebanon team has done so far. And after this live is done, I'll make sure that we post on our Instagram a link to our partner Embrace that runs this national crisis hotline, and we'll make sure that we post that. It's amazing the work that you all have done as individuals and through MedGlobal, as well as our partners at Embrace. Not only making sure that mental health is also something that's really prioritized and addressed as a key part of healthcare, but also working at destigmatizing, seeking treatment for mental health issues, which is something that, as you said, Tanya, the number of people that have faced trauma from the blast, from being there, as well as secondarily, enormous. So thank you to both of you partners for doing such great work on that.
Thank you.
And I know that it's getting kind of late for you all, and as you said, Tanya, the so I'll only ask a few more questions. As you both have already kind of mentioned, as you're saying, Tanya, the electricity in your house is not working right now. Obviously, the economic crisis is having an enormous impact on Lebanon in addition to everything else. And it would be really useful if you could both speak to the impact of that and the daily challenges that people are facing all the time now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to repeat myself, but right now, just to go over the key points, the country is really facing a growing shortage of medical supplies and essential medications, such as those used to treat chronic diseases and mental health. Um, and it's not about finances anymore. I mean, right now, the lack of availability is even to those who are privileged enough to buy their medication. If you have the money, it's just not available. So I've personally had to get my parents' medications from someone who's coming from abroad. You start calling people and telling them, please, if you're coming to Beirut, can you get me this and that medication? And it's really a scary feeling to think that your loved ones might not be able to get their own medication, and this is happening to really the most vulnerable people who are at risk. In addition to the fact that, as we know, Lebanon hosts the largest number of refugees per capita in the world, and on top of that, the migrant workers, which means that these people are not only displaced, but they've already endured traumatic experiences. And all of this overlapping with the crisis just exacerbates the poverty, like I said, with the economic crisis. So what I see as a need for the country right now, I mean, this situation has compounded all the needs of the population by now, this socioeconomic pressure, but above all, the cost of basic goods like food. The prices have really skyrocketed, and a lot of people can't afford it. So we've also proposed a project to hopefully have nutrition or food rations to be distributed to vulnerable areas, because this is something that also impacts health. In addition to the fact of medical fees, people are avoiding going to hospitals, and this only expects to worsen people's already existing conditions. And we've already started seeing, I mean, we're witnessing signs of deterioration in people who either take their medications day on, day off because they don't have it or they can't afford it. So the need for medication, I mean, and obviously the psychosocial support that we've already discussed. So
in addition to the
when
fact
you say, I mean, what is the greatest need? I don't even know where to start. I'm sure Nadia maybe will be able to put better words, but lack of fuel now. We're threatened with hospitals not having fuel to run their generators. They've been experiencing power cuts that last more than 30 hours, and there's no fuel to run these generators. We're talking about ventilators in ICU beds. So what do? You just turn off the ventilators and wait for people to die? It's just, I mean, I don't know. It's just mind-boggling, to be honest. It's just very difficult to process that this is happening.
even like the people, the doctors that don't want to leave are forced to leave. Beirut has always been a medical hub in the Middle East, and we had patients from all over the Middle East coming over to Lebanon for consultations, for surgeries, for follow-ups. You would go into a hospital in Lebanon like AUBMC, CMC. All these hospitals were known for their renowned doctors, for their up-to-date machines. And now these doctors are forced to leave simply because they cannot afford to live in Lebanon anymore with the fluctuation of the dollar versus the Lebanese lira rate. Their salaries won't make up to $200 a month. I mean, my child pediatrician is leaving, my friends gynecologists are leaving, heart doctors are leaving. I mean, like, the whole medical system and structure in Lebanon is changing. we used to say that I personally wouldn't live anywhere else because I felt so safe being here. I felt safe that my kids got the best education. We had a very good healthcare system. It's true, we weren't always feeling safe politically and socially because of the politics of the region, but there was some kind of a feeling of safety living in Lebanon. Now this is kind of like completely gone. We never encountered like when there was the electricity shortcuts, we had the generators to make up for that. Now we don't. You have to wait an hour, 2, 3 hours sometimes just to fill up a car tank with gas. Electricity cuts, the government electricity comes maybe half an hour in the 24 hours. The personal generators cannot accommodate for 23 hours being turned on. You have to turn it off so you can rest. Even after you rest them, you cannot fill them up with fuel. So it's like crisis over a crisis over a crisis. It's becoming really extremely hard to live here. Even it's like you are fighting to stay here. You always see this with people saying, and this is a love-hate relationship with this country. It's toxic living here. At the same time, you cannot leave it. It's really, really it's very sad to say and see that all these renowned doctors that have built a huge and great health care system in Lebanon, it's breaking down literally in front of their eyes, and they are forced to leave. They want to stay. My kid pediatrician says, I want to stay here. I don't want to stay, but I can't. I have kids studying abroad. I need to send money abroad. I cannot afford to stay here anymore. I hope that this changes soon. I mean, what the positive thing, what gives you a bit of hope is that despite the lack of trust and leadership from the Lebanese community, there's still some kind of community solidarity. You feel people that there's always an initiative coming up. You see NGOs, for example, that are coming up that renovated houses after the blast were free, where every person, according to his occupation, would contribute as much as he could to help renovate the houses of the people that were affected by the blast. I mean, these are the kind of initiatives that we are counting on as Lebanese to help us overcome such difficult times. I hope that the generation to come would be able to step up and show the face of Lebanon that we are all hoping for a better tomorrow. We pray that people overcome these religious sect barriers that have shown that Lebanon cannot stand back up if we keep acting this way. I hope that more NGOs like MedGlobal will be working on the ground with such transparency, because a lot of people are reluctant to invest in anything public because of the high corruption rates. I mean, people are pessimistic about the future, about what life is going to be 5 years from now. I hope that more NGOs come up and are transparent and equal in the distribution of the funds that they receive. They do not target one area or one sect or one group, rather try to extend their hand to different places, just like we have been trying to do. And in our meeting with one of the partners, we informed last week, we informed them that one of the things we're trying to do is like build a bridge in Lebanon where MedGlobal initiates kind of a bridge to help bring people together from different religions, different sects, and just have the humanitarian aspect in mind, regardless of anything else.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, as one blow follows another, like people's coping mechanisms are just weakened, and for many of us, keeping our head above water is becoming harder. And I think I've said that before in many meetings, but working for MedGlobal is what has maybe kept me sane all this time. You feel the impact, and MedGlobal Lebanon, like Radia said, we're trying to transcend the sectarian division or the mentality of the thought process. Yeah, exactly. To transcend that division by actually responding in Beirut, in areas that are labeled in Lebanon by their sect. So you would know that this area is whatever or this area is whatever. But we have really covered so far, and hopefully to cover more, almost the whole region from Arsail to Ba'a, Syrian refugees, Lebanese people, the blast area, Christian area, hospitals, really. I mean, it's been so rewarding, but in such a complex context, we are committed and we want to continue to do so as MedGlobal on the ground. And we want to support, and it's disheartening to see people's vulnerability increasing every day and more people requiring more medical support. We've become a nation on edge with limited access to anything and everything. And that includes what Radia was talking about. And this is what makes working for MedGlobal worthwhile, because these are the exact things that we can help with and we can target and we can no, I want to say change. Yes, I mean, change happens one person at a time, one project at a time. And I'd like to think that we can even grow further in Lebanon and have a larger impact in the region. Thank you, Dr. Zahir. Yeah. Hopefully, we'll overcome together. I mean, it's been really a journey, and I look forward to our future projects with Radia. We're doing our absolute best to try to not only implement as many projects as possible, but really to cater to the exact needs of the people. And this is something we're very proud of as MedGlobal Lebanon.
I hope that our voices are heard and that people try to realize that the infrastructure of Lebanon was not made to accommodate such a vast number of the Lebanese population, let alone the refugees that have been flooding into Lebanon since 2008. I mean, the Lebanese come with open hearts, with open hands, but the infrastructure hasn't helped at all. We have a lack of electricity, we have lack of fuel, we have lack of medication, we have lack of basic needs. I mean, sometimes you find that food has become a luxury, is no more a commodity. There's registered 1.5 million Syrian refugees in Lebanon. We have over 500,000 registered Palestinians in Lebanon, and the numbers are probably multiplied or multiplied by 3 or 4 with the illegal immigrants flooding in. I hope that the international community can better accommodate to the needs of these refugees, because what we saw when we went up to Arsail was heartbreaking. Lack of water, clean water, lack of proper housing. They asked us for food kits. They asked if we could help restore the tents. I mean, and this is just like one of the camps that we visited, and there are hundreds of others over there. So I hope that the international community keeps its eye on these refugees, on the Lebanese community in general, and will help raise awareness to transcend, as Dr. Tanya said, and overcome all these obstacles and hope for a better tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, that is just the most incredible sentiment, and I would say that it's really because of health and humanitarian leaders like you all and our incredible partners who are not only doing such incredible and needed work, but also speaking truth to power like you're doing right now and spreading awareness about the critical issues that really give us all hope about the future and the possibility of change. Thank you so much for covering such a wide issues, not only related to the Beirut blast and the crisis, both economic, political, and just in general that's being faced now, but also to the situation that refugees are facing in Lebanon. Thank you for talking about the health sector. This has really been incredibly powerful. I would just love to hear if there's any closing notes that each of you have and any takeaways for the people who are watching right now and who will see this later.
Um, takeaways for people in Lebanon, hang in there. I mean, working with organizations like MedGlobal, you come across people where you realize it's not as hopeless as you thought it was. That's one. Two, um, we're in this together. I mean, when the pandemic first started, we were all isolated and felt lonely. But I think I personally felt more comfort in knowing that it wasn't only me going through this, it's the whole world. So we're not alone, and there are organizations and people who are willing to really go out of their way to support, whether it's healthcare, whether it's mental health, whether it's politically. I mean, I know right now the country is dependent on assistance or international help, international aid, but I'm really hoping that the youth, and believe me, I can say this because I'm not Lebanese, but the youth of the Lebanese are so capable and they're so smart and they're so hardworking and they have the potential to pick this country really off the ground if they're given the chance to. So I have all faith in Lebanon. I mean, I've been here for 25 years and I've said it on and I'll repeat it again. I would never leave this country if I didn't have to. Lebanon is home, and I think it's been just a center point of so many things in the region, whether it's the Lebanese love of life, the Lebanese resilience. I know people are tired of hearing of this word resilience because that's how they're always labeled, as the phoenix, and they have to come over one catastrophe after another. But there's a comment that I've always heard living in Lebanon, that Beirut has lived through, I think, 5 earthquakes, where the city has been completely buried and had to be rebuilt 5 times. And I've heard this my whole life living in Lebanon. So yes, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but it's going to take some time and a lot of work. And this is what we're here for. This is why we're here. This is our destiny. I mean, this is what we're here to do, and we're not giving up.
I hope, I honestly pray that on the eve of the memorial and after a lot of speculations on what might happen tomorrow on the ground because of how furious people are from what's going on, I hope that people can march forward, not look back. I know I cannot begin to think what it must have felt like to lose a loved one or see someone injured or lose a house or be going on the streets trying to figure out in which hospital your loved ones are or if they're under the rubble. I mean, it's all unfathomable, but I hope that people are able to look past that and take this as a learning lesson for the future, to learn that nothing from violence will ever happen. The best thing to do is look forward, pray that in future elections people will be able to vote for people who can make a difference in the country, look past gender, sex, religion, and just I mean, the field we're working in is not just about helping feed someone or give them a hygiene kit, or it's way past that, past that. It's about building a relationship and bridges between those different religions and sects. I honestly pray that this will be a lesson learned for the future, and history won't repeat itself. Not just in Lebanon. I saw Dr. Zahir's question on how can we build on your experience in other disaster regions that MedGlobal serves. I just want to thank Dr. Zahir. MedGlobal, and this should be said out in the open, MedGlobal has not put any restrictions on us on who to help, on how to help. We have been able, and I repeat this again because you rarely, I mean rarely find this in regions in the world, especially in countries like Lebanon that have a lot of diversity in them. We have 18 different sects in Lebanon. So the country is either built on religion or politics or sects. And MedGlobal has been able to look past that. We have not, it's not something we consider, it's not within the criteria of considering where to help and how to help. We just go to places where we know that our helping hand will make a difference. And I hope that, and I pray that this will be something that other NGOs can look at and try to accommodate to people in that manner.
Thank you both so much again. This is really, I think that your insights are invaluable, and especially on the eve of the anniversary of the tragedy of the blast, we just deeply, deeply appreciate you speaking about your experiences, speaking from such an honest place. You inspire me on a personal level. And thank you so much for being so open with all of us. I will give, as we end this, I will give a plug for supporting the Lebanon program at MedGlobal. If you go onto our bio of our Instagram, you can find a link to our donate page. Please do consider donating for our Lebanon program and all of our other programs. And yeah, as we just closed, I would say, from myself in the United States, I know that all of your colleagues all over the world, in Bangladesh and Colombia and all of the countries we work in, really just with you today and tomorrow in particular, with you and with everybody in Lebanon, standing with you, and our hearts are really with you. So thank you both so much for all of your work and for speaking so openly today. Okay.
Thank you so much, Kat, for hosting this.
Thank you, Kat, for hosting this.
Thank
Really
you. And thank you to everyone who joined.
Thank you guys so much. Okay, and thank you for everyone who joined. We will also be downloading and posting this video on our Instagram shortly for anyone to watch or rewatch. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening. Bye.